One man, one murloc, one giant angry badger. This is Blue Please. It begins now. Yes, indeed, folks. You're tuned into Blue Please here on WoW Radio with myself, Total Biscuit. Welcome to the show. I'm still here and my mic is falling backwards. If I did the entire show in musical form, I bet you would all really, really object. Oh, well, yeah, this is Blue Please. We talk about World of Warcraft in a rather cynical fashion. As it should be, in my honest opinion. What's been happening this week? Bugger all, would be the accurate answer to that. So, apparently, druids didn't get nerfed quite as badly as they thought, so the whining kind of staved off. Our main tank went in to go and tank something and everything was absolutely fine. The added threat's great, the bleed components are all good, everything is fine. Oh, the druids lost 2k hit points. Yes, you lost 2k hit points, now you only have 17k buffed in blues. Good Lord in heaven. Right, okay, so Blue Please, we talk about WoW, that's the whole plan. Now, over the past few weeks we've been doing something that I like to call
Second Wind,
where we create this kind of continuity between shows in some kind of serialized fashion. Since I've discovered that people like listening to things that have some kind of continuity from week to week, rather than just me sitting down and bollocking on for an hour and a half. I can do that anyway, but it's going to be with continuity. It's going to be continuous bollocking on for an hour and a half. From week to week, from topic to topic. It's really quite hypnotic. Yes. Now, last week's Second Wind that we set out for you gave you something to think about, something to roll your brains over for a week and try and get some replies in and see what you think. I got some really good replies, actually, to this. Last week's Second Wind was, is raiding and endgame content becoming too hard and too inaccessible? An interesting question, I thought. Had some good replies in. So, I shall read a few out for you. Mr. Sarville is from the guild Synergistic, and he's on Deathicus US, and he says, "Hey TB, there is a cold hard truth here that people can't glance over. If your guild cannot get keyed, your guild cannot take Karazhan. Why would Blizzard turn down the difficulty from the original WoW or make epics available for everyone? The problem I see is the mentality of the people who insist that content is too hard. Heroic 5-mans are raid content. My guild and I approach them as we would a normal raid. Except with significantly fewer people, of course. This is not a bad thing. It's easier in a 40-man to blend in than a 5-man. Your individual skill and gear show up vividly in 5-mans. These 5-mans are great at their current difficulty. Sure, we wipe now more than I'd like, but every time we wipe, we get up and we learn from it. As a result, our guild gets better and better every single night. Potions help out greatly, but we have had runs without them. Potions make a big difference, but so does playing smart. Good class balance and intelligent spec and the willingness to trust everyone to do their job. We as a casual guild make progress weekly without sinking hundreds of gold into potions. Those who give up shouldn't earn the epics, plain and simple. If you don't have the focus or patience to wipe a few times a night, then just form an arena team and get epics that way. Thanks and sorry about the length. Keep up the great work. That's from Sarvel. A good point. Many, many good points made. It's interesting that people are actually starting to view heroic content as raid content, and actually having now tried it, I can see where they're coming from. It's hard. I remember wiping, I think it was 5 pulls into the slave pens on Heroic, with a relatively decent group in Blues, and we did wipe on a pull. You know, the Bogstruck pulls were all good, but when we were dealing with the nasty things with the pets and all that, with the psychic terror scream thing, ouch. Pain and suffering all around. It's difficult stuff. It really is difficult. And rather than saying, OMG, it is difficult, I don't like it anymore, I'm going to say, hey, that's difficult, awesome, let's crack on with it. A good way of doing things. So yeah, I believe that, of course, the heroics are difficult enough. That, as we stated last week, they are nerfing Gruul, and they are nerfing Magtheridon, and they're planning on nerfing a few other things, making things a little bit easier, making the epics a little bit better. I'd, of course, agree that making the epics better is a good thing, because some of them are outclassed by Blues, and that's highly silly. But making it easier, not so much, not so much. Although some people will no doubt disagree with me. It's interesting stuff, no two ways about that. So, the question is it too difficult? A very, very tricky question. Anyone that wants to email in right now and see if they answer that question, you can. themurloc@gmail.com, as per the place where you email all your comments this week, themurloc@gmail.com. Now, I mean, the best way to describe this is the topic that I'm going to lead into after this. And I'm going to introduce you to that topic right now so you can have a little bit of a think about it before I actually launch head first into it. I was thinking about this over the week, and I was thinking, well, is it difficult? Is it too difficult? Is it not difficult enough? What's going on with it? And I came to the conclusion that it's a very, very difficult thing to balance, exceedingly difficult thing to balance, and there's a reason for this. Now, I'm going to put this statement out in front of you before I finish up this week's second win, and I'll come on to this topic after the break. I'm going to put this statement out in front of you so that you can have a little think about it, and you can email in your opinions, right? Consider this. Okay? My argument is that the abandonment of legacy raid content has created a huge and almost untraversable disparity between guilds both attempting the same content. Yep. So you're looking at guilds who are attempting Karazhan and Gruul right now who haven't even got past Rag pre-expansion. We can't possibly expect them to fare very well. Now, here's the question. How far should Blizzard go to cater to these people? Because let's face it, they've dug their own grave right there by creating this huge disparity between legacy raid content and what's going on right now, and assuming perhaps that people have already done all of these legacy raid content instances and are ready to deal with this stuff. And as we're seeing, Nihilum, yeah, they're doing well. Curse, D&T, all the big guilds, they're progressing well. The people who've done AQ40 and Nax, yeah, they're progressing well. And what about the people who haven't? And now there's absolutely nobody who wants to go back into those instances. Now, the argument that I'm going to put forward after the break in detail and give my explanation as to how you can fix that is that because they've abandoned all these instances, they've created themselves a huge gap, absolutely gigantic gap, which is not properly bridged, which is why you have your hardcore guilds blazing through the content, at least Karazhan, Gruul, and then going on through that. And then you've got your guilds who are perhaps formed for the Burning Crusade or didn't get all that far with legacy raid content beforehand, are wiping over and over and over again in heroics, even on harder 5-mans, for God's sake, and not getting anywhere in Karazhan and wondering, well, what can I do to improve rather than throwing myself up against this wall over and over and over again that we're clearly not tall enough to leap over. It's a very interesting and very problematic thing. So let's look at difficulty for a moment. Your logical progression. You do your 5-mans up to 70 in your gear, yeah? You key up for your keying instances. We're looking at stuff like Arcatraz. You key up for that, yeah? More difficult stuff in Arcatraz. Obviously, instances usually that involve getting a key are a little bit trickier. Shadow Lab the same. So you've got your more difficult instances that need to be keyed up for 5-man keys, you just walk in. Then you've got your heroic keying up, which requires you to run those instances up to Revered. So you're being encouraged to run your level 70 instances, as in your stuff like your Shattered Halls, your Steam Vaults, your Shadow Lab, and of course with Tempest Keep you don't really have to worry about that because they're all level 70 instances, so you can just run them anyway. But that's the kind of thing you're being encouraged to do. Okay, so you have to do that, and you get your Revered Key. Now what? What happens when you get your Revered Key? Okay, you've got your Revered Key, you can now do it in Heroic mode, at which point the Ramparts will kick the living snot out of you. Because you're looking at raid position in there. You're looking at, say, just take an example of Slave Pens, because I've actually been in there, and I can point out from my own experience how difficult this is. You wander yourself in there, and you get out the first pack is those bog strocks that run around, those silly little crab type things, and they hit cloth for 4k. They hit the tank pretty damn hard too, so you dedicated healing on the tank, they take a lot longer to DPS down, and you've got to be really careful with your DPS, because you don't want to be pulling aggro on those things, and that's just the first pull in Slave Pens. That's tricky stuff. That's raid discipline that's required right there. That's back in the day, when you couldn't afford to pull a Molten Giant either. When you pulled a Molten Giant, it was like, GG nub, you just wiped the raid. It's killed you, and now it's running on the bloody healers. Congratulations. It's the same principle, only it's within a 5-man environment. Now, if this is the logical step up before you head into Karazhan, and you've got people that haven't raided before, then they're going to really have some problems. Now, is that acceptable? It's a very difficult way of looking at things. I would certainly say that heroics are more difficult than Molten Core used to be, even with a 40-man. They're damn tricky. Some of the bosses are absolutely obscene. Now, I haven't seen enough of them to judge against, say, Blackwing Lair and AQ40, but I have heard rumours, and I've heard people telling me, that they are incredibly difficult. Even for raiders. Raiders wiping it. I've watched Kiki going and doing heroics upstairs, and he wipes. They wipe in there all the time. It's worthwhile because they're acquiring the Badge of Justice, and they're also acquiring better loot. But it's raid discipline, it's raid principle, and it's damn difficult. Now, if you're expecting people who perhaps have maybe only done a bit of Molten Core to go from your 5-mans into your heroics, you're going to have some serious issues. Now, you can tell me that, oh, well, it's okay, you can train in your you can train in your 5-mans before you go into your heroics. You can trade raid skill in 5-mans, at which point your argument falls to pieces, of course, because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Of course you can't trade raid skill in 5-mans. You can't do it. It's not the same thing by any stretch of the imagination. Doesn't matter how hard that 5-man is and how much raid principle is involved, i.e. don't pull aggro, or you'll get hit for 4k. It doesn't matter, because that does not make you a raider. It doesn't train you to be a raider. It just makes a really damn difficult 5-man. For the love of God, this should be pretty obvious to people. They had the same problem back in the day with legacy content. The reason they brought Zul'Gurub in, it didn't end up being correct, because of course Zul'Gurub was far too difficult at the time. But the reason they brought in that was to give people a bridge between UBRS and of course your 5-mans like Scholar, Strat and DM. A bridge through to Molten Core, Onyxia and Blackwing Lair, okay? And that made sense, yeah? It was kind of misconceived, but their heart was in the right place. It's a shame it wasn't earlier. Of course, they didn't realise that there would be a huge jump. Because back in the day, Blizzard really hadn't planned Endgame to be, wow, all of this stuff. They added stuff in as they realised this is what people were going to do. They weren't going to flunce around role-playing. They weren't going to go and grind rep. They weren't going to PvP. They were going to do raiding. So like, okay, fair enough, raiding's our strong point. We've got the Molten Core, now we've fixed all the bugs in the Molten Core. What do we do? Well, there's the Blackwing Lair, that's for something after Molten Core. Oh, but there's all these guilds who can't actually really get anywhere in Molten Core. Okay, here's Zul'Gurub, here's your bridge. Which is fair enough, except for the fact that it was more difficult than Molten Core in many places. To be quite honest, it's interesting to see that Molten Core, Zul'Gurub and Blackwing Lair is perhaps the more correct way of looking at things, because Zul'Gurub's less tank and spank, whereas Molten Core was, of course, all tank and spank. And that's all that 5-man content is, tank and spank. But, of course, the difficulty and the amount of cohesion that you have to have with multiple tanks and cross-healing and how you function as a raid is a huge leap. Now, that was there, pre-expansion. So for those people who went through that content properly, I mean, say, for instance, I'm not going to have any problem dealing with Karazhan, because I've been in Nax. Anyone who's been in Nax, in fact, anyone who's been in, as far as I'm concerned, Blackwing Lair, understands raid principle. The bosses are a little bit more complicated in Karazhan, but as far as I'm concerned, if you've been into Blackwing Lair and you've got relatively far in Blackwing Lair, then you know raid principle. You know how to raid. You have been trained to do so. You can't train to do so in a 5-man. And when you jump over to Karazhan, you're thinking, well, WTF, this is too difficult. It's tricky stuff. Very tricky indeed. So what you've got there is a disparity. What you've got there is an intraversible leap for people. What Blizzard are trying to do is they are trying to make instances challenging enough for your hardcore raiders, but easy enough so that people who have not done all this content beforehand and haven't been trading raiding discipline and haven't been trained in what you have to do in a raid in general and how to work as a raid coherently with other people, they're trying to make it suitable for both, and it won't work. Absolutely it will not work. No way. I'm sorry, some of the stuff in Karazhan is too hard for people to do if that's the position they're in. Yeah, if you're a hardcore guild, you can go through it. I mean, Kiki's guild's still wiping on Netherspite, and they got all the way to Thaddeus in Naxxramas. Now, of course, they could be a bunch of nubs, Hi, Shattrath Emporium on Defies Brotherhood. But it does show that it's difficult and challenging. That's fine. I think Karazhan is there, and Karazhan is the difficulty that it should be at that point. But if you see a guild flaunting it at Karazhan that's barely touched Molten Core before because maybe they were formed after the Burning Crusade, maybe they rolled up alts and they've leveled them up, and there's no reason to go back to these instances, how can you expect people to possibly do that? How can that work? I have an answer to that, and I hope you have an answer to it too. I'd like to hear your opinions on this. themurloc@gmail.com is the place to email. Send me a quick email during the music break. Now, just because it was so popular last week, and there was a competition last week to win Captain Dan albums that I called Where is the RP? And I'm going to extend that competition by popular demand, because I've had people emailing in saying, oh, but I don't have a mic. I don't have enough time to get my friends together and do a pirate impression for you. Well, you've got another week, folks, and I'm going to play some more Captain Dan right now. This is Captain Dan and the Scurvy Crew. Beware, there may be swearing. This is We Be Sailing, authentic pirate hip-hop. Enjoy.